I remember seeing thousands of ladybugs, like them covering my hands and crawling over people. And remember being in Mount Shasta and seeing like a holographic figure in the woods and all of the lights of the fairies. And I remember seeing the lights dropping into the mountain. And I remember all the stuff happening in the portal room and all of these experiences. And you would say, like, wow, Cayce, you were in so much magic, but there was something inside of me that was like, is it? Is it magic? Hello, everyone. Welcome to Seriously Human, episode 3. Episode 1 was about my mom beginning to channel. Episode 2 was broken up into two parts about all of the initiations she went through. And today we're covering a wonderful topic about magic and synchronicities. And we're going to go through all of the stories and we're going to help you create magic in your life. So let's first start with this is Kelly. This is my mom, the channel of the Angel Raphael, who we've been talking to. And I'm just going to go straight into the question. And I'm going to say, Mom, what does the word magic mean to you? And what's your relationship with magic?
I love magic. Magic is so much fun. Like, what would life be like without magic, right? Magic to me is when everything is just lining up in a way that just blows your mind, and you're like, no, you won't even believe what just happened. And you just are delighted and excited to share it with everybody because it is I guess it's like a reflection that life is magical and that everything is unified and synchronistic, and sometimes you just get to like flow into that state. And when that happens, there's probably nothing, I mean, there's lots of things in life that are incredible, but living in a magical state is really high on my list.
Right. So, in a way, when life is magical, it's a recognition that life is alive working with you, right? That you're not alone in a
Mhm.
way, that there's
I
more to life than meets the eye.
Yeah, it really shows you that sometimes it's spirits, right, on the other side that have passed that you love. Sometimes it's magical beings on the other side or beyond the veil, or it just totally feels like the universe is completely conspiring to support you on your journey. Sometimes it comes in from the animal kingdom. There's all different ways that magic appears, but it's the unexpected. And yet at the same time, when it's happening, you're like, oh, yeah, of course, it should be happening. It's just that we forgot about it.
Right. And what causes us to forget about it?
I think that we get caught in the constructs. Some people might want to call it even the matrix, in our mind. We step out of our heart. We get focused on worrying about what's happened in the past, or dwelling on it, or worrying about what could happen. And we're not really aligning with the flow, because we're operating in a paradigm where the magic is always right there. It's just whether we're able to take the time to get into a state to perceive it.
Right. So, what would that state be that allows you to see the magic, to put your magic glasses on in a way?
Oh, magic glasses. Well, there's a couple things. There's magic that just, for me, it comes in two ways. I've had incredible magic after somebody has gone to the other side, because they come back and communicate. And that in itself is incredibly magical. And then there's what we call most intentional magic. And that is when we decide, like when I go on a journey to attune to the light codes to prepare for class, I call it a magic trip. I'm going on a magic trip. And I tell you and your sister, like, and we know what that means. I'm going on a magic trip. And inevitably, incredible magical things happen. And And perhaps that would be happening anyway, but because I've declared and because I've intended that it's a magic trip, and all my energy, attention, and focus is on aligning with synchronicity, flow, and magic for a greater purpose. And I think that that's one of the keys is that when I'm doing it, let's say on a magic trip, it really is to be of service and to gather the magic and the fun and the play and the information and the codes in order to share with others, to provide that frequency so they too can come into alignment with that harmonic flow. And so that's for me, I mean, all magic is the same, but that's one way of magic. And I think that's one way that a lot of people can also attune to and experience for sure. And a lot of people will say, oh my God, I went to Egypt and I was doing this thing and all these incredible magic things happen. Often when we go to a sacred site in particular, we open up to a frequency because a lot of people have come there prior to us. We're working with magic. We're tuning to other dimensions, other realities, other beings. And so that vibration is there. So that's one way. And then there's magic that has happened to me in my life that I was no way intending or necessarily looking for. Like for instance, when I started to channel, that was pretty darn magical, but I
Mhm.
wasn't trying to channel. Or when Uncle Russ died and he came right in, he came even into your father. He brought magical symbols and stories. We weren't necessarily asking him to do that, but that magic was coming in and we were open to it. So those are kind of the two different ways.
So the first way and the first step is to have some sort of intention. And I think that what you said about death, when someone crosses over to the other side, you do have an intention to connect with them, to see the signs.
Mhm.
Many times when someone passes in someone's life, there's an intention of, hey, just talk to me, just, send me some information. Let me know that you're with me, that you love me, that everything's all okay. And in that, whether that's an intention for magic or not, it's an intention that directs your attention towards synchronicities and signs. And
Mhm.
so the first step, whether it is what you said of like the unintentional versus the intentional magic, is to have an intention to be looking for synchronicities, to be looking for signs, to be tuning into vibrations and such. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and probably you don't even realize it when someone passed because you've got so much grief, right? You're kind of usually in a vulnerable place. Your heart is pretty open and you are trying to make some kind of connection to this person that you love dearly who you've lost. And and at the same time, they're reciprocal. So I find personally after somebody passes, some people can stay with you for years and continue to bring signs and you can connect and communicate. Other people literally just like take off. They really have no interest in staying here for whatever reason they're out. And other people, or most, I feel at least within the 24 to 48 hours after passing, there's some accessibility if we're able to let go of some of our pain and kind of open up to the possibility that they're there communicating with us. I mean, my experience with my brother-in-law is that he remained with us for like 12 full years, completely accessible, almost to the point that he was more accessible after he passed in some ways, even than when he was here. Like I could call him at
Mm.
any time, at any second. And then other people, as you know, I've lost two sisters, two brother-in-laws, both parents, and like my dad, for instance, came right in, communicated with me because he had something he wanted to get done for his funeral. That's kind of how he was, He was like, Kelly, get a pen and paper. I have something to say. And then that was it. The other time that I find that is easy to access people that are on the other side is on a birth date. The portal opens on their death date and sometimes also on their birth date, where your accessibility to them is stronger. And I find that to be very fascinating. But um, Yeah, people passing is a way to kind of open up that channel and flow to other dimensions that then bring in magic in a later, perhaps in a more intentional way.
Right. So it seems like the creation of magic comes from the intention to connect with something beyond yourself, whether that is someone who has passed to the other side, whether that is an ascended master, god, goddess, whether that's just the source of all creation or the angels or whatever. It begins with an intention to connect with something beyond yourself. And your ability to connect with that thing is about how much you put your consciousness towards it. So, for example, do you think that Russ was around longer because there were more people consciously thinking about him and remembering him and needing him and missing his energy than some, like, say, somebody else who passed? Or because people had evolved through the process of grief with him, that the grief of other people, the process was just quicker? What do you think it has to do with, like, why are some energies so present and others not? Does it have to do with your relationship to how much you're focusing on their frequency?
I think it does to some extent, but I also think that I remember so vividly sitting with Ross and him saying to me, "I'm going to live forever." And I didn't get that till after he died, that he really was an energy that has kind of lived on energetically forever. And that he knew before he died that he was going to die. For those, well, right, about we were standing together in the kitchen and he was this bigger than life, jolly, amazing person that just when he was with you, you felt like you were the most important person in the world. And everyone felt that way. So loved. I mean, his funeral, it was just overflowing. And it was 2007. I'm standing with him in the kitchen, and he says he's going to go get a tattoo, two tattoos. And he had no other tattoos. He had never gotten one. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And he was 63 at the time. He'd never gotten a tattoo. And he's like, no, I just have to get it. And I said, I'll go with you. And he said, no, I have to do this on my own. You can't come. And so he came back and he had a tattoo on his wrist right here, like almost like a serial number. And it said 2008 on it. And he also got a tattoo on his buttocks and it had a ladybug on it. And we're like, well, those are kind of interesting choices. And the ladybug, we were like, okay, that's kind of fun. We get it. But what's with the 2008 on your wrist? Like, it's weird. And he said, well, that's it. And we were like, well, what do you mean that's it? And he just wouldn't talk about it anymore. He was just like, that's it. And he was, a vital, healthy guy, very successful, worked really hard, had played, rode motorcycles, had a good time, went on boating trips. He was like a vital guy. And and then he got really sick in August of 2008. He was dead by October. And I remember visiting him in the hospital, and he was just like, that's it. Like he knew he was out. And later I worked, he had a big office building that was vacant after he died that he owned. And I ended up starting a company and I was working in his office. And I remember finding some papers in the drawer there. And he was talking to a being. The being was called Takamena, and he wrote a book, Whispers from Your Soul. And looking back, it was his soul whispering to us. He was sharing this. And although he was a businessman, he had a spiritual side as well. And I came across these writings and I found he was communicating with Takamen about the fact that he had to go on the other side, that he had a lot of work to do on the other side. But this was something he had hidden from everyone else. But somewhere in his essence, he knew, even though he wasn't ill and there was nothing wrong with him, that he was going to die in 2008.
Mm.
And I remember my sister saying that she felt that she regretted that there were times before he got sick, toward the end, like maybe spring or summer of 2008, where he was trying to communicate something to her. And she energetically had a sense that he was out, but she couldn't handle it, so she just blocked it. So he was aware that he had to go and that he had a mission and something to do on the other side. And I think because that was so clear prior to death, that when he passed, he was so present and he came in with such incredibly strong signs to us, like, hey, I haven't gone anywhere. I'm right here and I'm going to work with you to help you to align with magic, to teach. He taught us magic. And if it weren't for that passing in that particular way, I mean, that felt like a huge initiation into magic.
Yeah, totally. And it was interesting from my experience when all that magic began, I felt like included in it, yet I wasn't able to connect in the same way that you guys were describing your connection to that. And I think there were a number of reasons because of that that I want to get into later, just in case people feel like I'm the only one not getting the magic and everyone else is around me. But I want to bring it back to this like tuning into the frequency aspect. And when the moment where I really, I think, had the most confirmed connection with him, because there were lots of times where I felt connected or like I was getting a sign or I was hearing, a voice in some way, but I just didn't trust it, right? I didn't really believe it. It sounded, it could just, I make lots of voices. I can make voices in my head. Why not, right? And it wasn't until much, much later after his passing, like 10 years or so, uh, we were at Mary Ellen's and it was after doing some really intense ceremony and clearing and everything and I was really tuning into his energy. I was reading his book, The Whispers of the Soul with the messages of Takamenen. And I had just performed a ceremony that, was really intense for me. And you guys said that I channeled, and I didn't really remember the ceremony that much. And I was wiped afterwards. And after being completely wiped out, and I had just finished reading his book, I sat up and I had a conversation with him and it went back and forth. And I was like, that's nice. It's just kind of another dialogue in my head that I'm having that sounds like the dialogue, like sounds like the voice that I was reading in the book, right? Because I knew his voice. And when I read the book, I put his voice in there and I could hear him speaking as I read the book. And so then that was the voice that I was hearing. And I was like, just like how I imagined it when I was reading, that's all I'm hearing, and my brain is creating the rest. And what really took it to the next level for me was I just finished having that conversation and I leave the sunroom and I'm walking through the dining room to the kitchen and Mary Ellen's in the dark in the living room and she says, Cayce, come here. I have a message from your uncle for you. And she had written in the book that I was reading that I had left, she had a channeled message where she had written almost word for word the exact conversation that I had had in the sunroom in my imagination moments before, or imagination, my imagination, right? And it was and I completely broke down because it was like, I guess the magic had been there all along, and it was my inability to trust or to surrender, and my continuous skepticism, and my continuous questioning, and my continuous assuming that people were having a totally radically different experience than I was, and expecting if I was going to connect, that's what my experience would be like, right? And so I think that a lot of people probably experience that, especially being surrounded by people who are having these magical experiences, or say people who join our membership and they hear all these other people saying, I saw this and I heard this and this being came and connected with me. And I know that there's a handful of people that are like, I don't see nothing. I don't hear nothing. I don't know if it's in my head. I don't know what the heck you people are talking about, but I want some of what you're having, right? And I understand the pain of feeling like everyone's connected except for you. And you don't necessarily want to admit that you're not connected, but you're not saying that you are, right? And you're just listening and going along and participating. And so I kind of wanted to bring it back to that for the people that might have been in my position, because that was a stage of from like 12 to like 23, where I was in this middle ground where, yeah, there are all these magical things, and you're showing me all these synchronicities, and you're saying this and you're saying that, and it all makes sense. And it all is like, yeah, I see that, but it's just not clicking as, oh my God, this is the most magical thing that's ever happened in my life. Because you and other people were having these experiences that seemed completely unreal in the way that you would describe them compared to the experience I was having. And so I just want to talk to people of how do you move to that next level and what really is getting in the way for people?
I mean, I think on a lot of levels, you could speak perhaps better to that because I've been very fortunate that when I intend and open to magic, it easily flows for me. I mean, I think that that's what happened when I was 21. It came to me and I said, okay, let's go. And so then I was an open channel, and maybe as an open channel for all those years, it flows easier. And it's really, I'm really delighted to hear you share your perspective. And I know that a lot of people have that experience. But they experience magic in different ways. Like it doesn't, magic can come in so many different forms. It doesn't have to necessarily come in the form in which I experience it, you know. And so I guess in some ways it would be interesting to define magic. I mean, I'd love to share some of the magical stories because I think a lot of people would also be able to relate to them themselves, but maybe they didn't even at that time define them as magical.
Right. And the thing is like I witnessed a lot of these magical stories. And in the mo like for example, we can share the magical story of when Mary Ellen passed and we went back to the house and the whole house was covered in ladybugs. And I went and I saw that and it was undeniable, right? All of those ladybugs were there and all over the entire house. And yeah, and you experience it and you see it and for some but sometimes there's still like a part that even though is so blatant, so right there in your face, that is like, is it magic, right? And I think that that's like a lot of people, like the magic is right there in your face. They're like at Russ's funeral, there are I remember seeing thousands of ladybugs, like them covering my hands and crawling over people and all through the pews. And I remember when Mary Ellen died, all of those ladybugs. And I remember being in Mount Shasta and seeing like a holographic figure in the woods and all of the lights of the fairies. And I remember seeing the lights dropping into the mountain. And I remember, all the stuff happening in the portal room and all of these experiences. And you would say, like, wow, Cayce, you were in so much magic, but there was something inside of me that was like, is it? Right? Is it magic? And but the thing is it's so undeniable that something is going on and that you're connected to something. And I think that one of the big resistances for me was that I didn't feel special enough for magic to happen to me,
Hmm.
right? That magic happened to people that were special. Special people had dead people come talk to them and all these beings. Special people could channel. Special people led the magic trips. Special people cultivated this kind of stuff. And I wasn't, and there was a sense of worth there of like, I wasn't special enough. I don't have that skill. I don't have that talent, right? And the desire for me as a young kid to want to be special because people were telling me, oh, you're spiritually gifted, you're spiritually talented. It's like, well, then I should hear it. Then I should see it. Then it should present itself. And so I would say that the number one killer of magic is expectation. And so moving forward beyond that, why do you think that you and other people in our family were able to have less expectations than others?
Less expectations. I mean, I didn't have any expectation.
Right. That's my point.
Right. I mean, it just was. It was just, it would wake me up in the middle of the night and they would talk to me and then I'd come down and then there would be the ladybugs or the singing bowls would be singing on their own or the snow would turn purple or the blue light beams would land in the backyard. But I wasn't like, oh, I expect them to do that. It just was. It just was.
Right. And so probably like what I'm hearing here is like the difference is nobody previous to you had experienced that and then shared it with you, setting an expectation for them what it would be when you experienced it later.
Yeah, and also I think that if somebody else that was not in a hierarchy, but was like a uh my mother or my sister or someone had experienced it and I hadn't, and they were kept telling me about all these incredible magical things that were happening all of the time, I would I would almost be in resistance to it.
Right.
Because I was like, oh, well, they think they're special or they have this and I'm not experiencing it. And I would be in resistance to it. And I noticed that there, are you okay there?
Right. My computer was dying and I couldn't figure out how to plug it in.
Okay.
Sorry
Life,
about that.
life happens, people. Life happens.
Oh.
Um, So yeah, I would have, it's really interesting because we've never talked about this before, but I would have been resistive to it or not want to hear it. And I noticed like my oldest sister, Patty, um, when we started to channel, Mary Ellen and I, my other sister and I at the same time, the energy came through her and she said no. And
Mhm.
then we were kind of like in this pack, the two of us, and Jane too, like we were having all these wild magical things and she was sort of kind of left out because she wasn't experiencing them. And then when we would come and like be excited and share these things that were so magical, so undeniable, black and white, like could prove scientifically, she would be like quiet or kind of resistive. And we'd be like, what is with that? But now energetically that you're sharing this, I get why she would be like, okay, back off. Like, I get you guys are so magical, you're having an amazing time, and I just don't get it. And then there was this particular incident when her husband passed. And it was right around Valentine's Day. And she was obviously incredibly distraught and grieving. And she's like, I know he bought me something because I can see the receipt of this beautiful ring that he got me before he passed, but he wasn't able to give it to me. And I said, well, maybe I can bring him in and ask him where it is. And she was super resistant to it. And then she was like, okay. And I brought him in. It was this incredible heart connection. And he said he had bought her this ring and that it was in the foyer of her house in the coat closet in a shoe box in a shoe,
Mm.
which is super specific, right?
Right.
So she went to the shoe closet and she, the coat closet, she opened it up, she went on the floor, she opened up, and there it was. And that was like, you can't deny that. Like, I had no idea he bought her something, I have no clue where it could be. Like, there's no like saying, oh, I made that up or
Right, you
blah.
didn't guess a bunch of places and then, and it wasn't an obvious place. It wasn't like, his bedroom side drawer. And it wasn't like
Yeah.
this shoe and then check that and then check this. It was like that shoe in this closet, boom.
Boom, right? And she got it. And in the moment, she cried and she was so happy and she put the ring on and she wore it and she had it forever, right?
Right.
But then she didn't speak of it again. Like, as if like that didn't happen. And then when we would talk about magical things and she would be so resistant, we'd be like, well, how can you deny it? What about the time, where Michael came and we told you where the ring was? And she would
Right.
just kind of like change the subject. So there was huge resistance. And so I hear what you're saying.
And I think this is a huge topic for a lot of people in this community because so often we hear questions about like, oh, my husband, poo-poos me, or my kids think I'm crazy, or this or the other thing of like friends, family members, all kind of like, you're crazy, it's not real. And people go, how can they deny it? Right? And it really comes from a place of how you bring it across. because the way that it can come across is extremely exclusive, extremely I'm special and you're not, is the way that people receive it if you're really not careful in the way that you present it. And I
Mhm.
remember that that was a huge thing for me because when Russ passed, there was this huge exclusive energy towards me, right? That we have a relationship with him. You're 12, you didn't have a relationship with him. And so you're not really allowed to be part of our grieving process. You grieve on your own, kind of thing,
Mm.
right? And that was then my also experience with magic of just like how everybody was in the other room grieving and I was left alone, everybody was experiencing the magic and I was witnessing from the other room, right? And because of that, there was a huge feeling of like, okay, they're special, I'm not. They're the ones connecting, I'm not. I follow their lead, etc. And at a young age, there's more of a forcefulness, like you're more open, right? Of like, sure, I can let go. But when you're older, you start to have like a sense of self and you're like, screw you, you're not more special than me, right? And so even if the magic is undeniable, people can't accept it because of what it causes them to reflect inside of themselves. And so, a question if we want to spread the new earth, if we want to spread more magic, more synchronicity, more love, more peace on earth, how do we present it in a way to people where it doesn't feel like I'm special, you're not. I'm connected and you're not. This is undeniable magic. And if you don't see it, that's your fault, right? And present it in a way of more like, this is something that I didn't experience before. It's something that there's a step-by-step process that if you set an intention, you surrender your expectations, and you practice tuning in, you'll experience it too, but in your own unique way. And if we approached connecting the magic the same way that people teach art, I think that we'd have a bigger impact because in art, which is so funny because I failed art class for 6 years straight. I would just get F, right, on all of my art. And I was like, I'm no good at art. I'm no good at connecting to magic, right? But I'm an extremely creative person. I'm an extremely intuitive person. But because the label that I wasn't an artist, that I wasn't getting the magic came on to me, I refused to, I somehow created a block around receiving the magic and creating the art, right? And it was only until I realized that art is just a creative expression, that magic is just allowing yourself to be open to your intuition, that I was able to tune into it more, and that it was a unique experience for everyone.
Yeah. And I certainly hope that, I knew you were 12 when all of that was happening and that that's the valid feelings that you were having. And I can see now that if all this swirling, wild, crazy magic was happening and you weren't experiencing it, how one could feel isolated or left out or something's wrong with me or I'm not getting it. Um, but certainly when we're sharing and helping others to align with the harmonic flow and the frequency of magic, I think through all the experiences now, it's something that can be more taught in a way and step by step of how do you cultivate and step into that harmonic synchronistic flow of energy and magic, and how do you go about it? For instance, Debbie started going with me on magic trips, or your sister went to Ireland last year, and it was just filled with magic. But there were steps, right? There were processes in place and ways to do it. And anybody on that trip would have had those magical experiences, I think. And everybody is always has access to magic.
Right. So let's frame how you create sacred space because this is a huge aspect of creating magic is creating the conditions for magic to exist in. Just like how there have to be certain conditions on Earth in order for life to exist that are incredibly fragile, like the right amount of oxygen and water and soil. It's the same thing for allowing the life of magic to exist. So what would you say some of those conditions are?
Well, intention is 90%, So let's say you're going on a magic trip. Usually, for me, I feel called by spirit to a specific location and a place. So if you feel a calling, like a desire inside to be somewhere, you can resist that or poo-poo it or push it away or deny it or feel like I don't have the money to go or other people can or the weather's wrong or I can't get time off. Or you can say, okay, I'm totally in, universe. Support me in finding a way for me to go there. Bring me the funds, open up my calendar, create the spaciousness, bring the people. So that's number one. Then things start to flow and it gets you pretty excited because you get to go. And then the next thing that I do is I align with what is it that we're tuning to. So let's say we're in Ireland, maybe I'm really connecting with a certain goddess, like Goddess Bridget and her frequency and her teachings, or the Dantanu energy, or Goddess Danu, or the water beings, or the fairies, or the elementals. Or let's say we're going somewhere else, right? You tune into that your intention is to align. And for me, let's say I'm giving Ireland again as an example, because that's for my origin, is also to clear ancestral stuff, right? To open up to healing for myself, for my ancestors, for future generations, and to bring the magic of Ireland back to teach, to share, to serve. So there's a purpose greater than just me. I think that's the next step.
Right. So
And
you're not
then,
go, let's just slow down and break down. So the first step is to have an intention greater than yourself, right? An intention to connect with something greater than yourself, evolve something greater than yourself, heal something greater than yourself. It's simply to have an intention of something that is greater than just, I want to see magic. Right? Because some people
oh,
come at
for
it like,
sure.
show me magic. I just want magic, right? And it doesn't show up because they're not asking for something beyond their own entertainment, their own sense of worth, their own sense of feeling special, right?
Mhm.
And so you have to set an intention for something greater than yourself. Now, next step.
So then the energy for me starts to come in, and begin to receive connection and messages, and then I start to pack. And when I start packing, I'll wake up and I'll be guided to something in the house. So you need to bring this necklace or these earrings, for instance, that makes no sense. Like, for instance, in Ireland, I had to bring these certain gold earrings that had a sphere on them. Why? I had no idea, but I packed them. I had to bring certain crystals, certain candles, certain books, things to begin to create, to cultivate energy that I'm bringing from where I am here to where it is that I'm going. So that would be the next step. And so then
So
you pack your suitcase, it's the magic suitcase.
So let me break that step down for everyone. I just want to break down each step. So first, we're going to intend something greater than ourselves. And then two, we're going to surrender our logic and trust our intuition, right? Because that's
Yeah,
what you're doing.
exactly.
You're surrendering logic and trusting intuition.
Yeah. And before you intend for something greater than yourselves, usually you receive a message or a yearning or a calling to go to a specific geographical location. So, I was just in Mexico, or let's say I'm in Scotland and I have to go to the furthest islands out in the middle of nowhere because the stones are calling me. Usually something triggers a calling. Then you have to open up to the universe providing for you to go, whatever those logistics may be, right? Like for Malta, I needed funds for somewhere else. Maybe I need my calendar to free up. Then you've got your intention to do something greater than yourself, and then you start to pack your magic bag.
And so,
And then,
so let me just,
Go ahead.
so this is specifically a magic trip, but it doesn't always have to be a trip. But what it is you have a calling, some sort of spark initiates that magic is going to happen. then you, whatever that spark is, that vision that comes to you, whether that's traveling, whether that's creating something, whatever that is, you then say, these are the things that I need in order to make the thing that you are showing me happen. And you wait for that to come. Then you set an
Mhm.
intention greater than yourself. Then you surrender the logic and follow your intuition. All right, let's keep going.
And that's a great point because for me, there's magic trips, but also I can create magic in my backyard where I had to like build an entire platform for
A
star
yurt.
being, right? What? A whole
It's a
yurt.
yurt.
Right. So that was, I didn't have to travel far for that. So it can be in your backyard. Okay. So then you arrive on the magic trip. And for me, and everybody's different, collaborating with other people feels really essential because when you're connecting with other people, you build the energy together. And Raphael, like on every trip, magic trip, wherever it was in the world, which there have been many, I almost always go with two other people, right? So it's the energy of three, but it has to be at least one other person.
Mm-hmm.
And so then when you arrive, everybody has brought from their space the things that were in their magic suitcase. And we always then make an altar.
Mm-hmm.
So, and when you start to like maybe you just had a t-shirt that was in your bag. Like I was just in Mexico and someone gave us a t-shirt and the t-shirt just happened to have a jaguar on it. We just happened to be working with jaguar medicine and then a real jaguar showed up, right? So in Ireland, let's say you're working with the triple spiral and the Celtic energy, and you maybe you'll bring a magic egg and somebody else brings one and they're twins, and then that means you're working with this twin goddess, like all different things start to develop as you gather your things and you lay them out and you, in a very sacred way, you create a sacred container for the magic trip. You open up the space and you move into prayer and intention that we are opening up for the greatest and the highest good to align with whatever frequency that this land has to share with me, that I may bring this information back to share with others. And in that process, building together like three people or two people, an altar, the altar starts to communicate. Like when I was in Glastonbury in the fall, the altar was talking to us. I mean, we had a magic moment where an angel on the altar physically by itself, defying all laws of physics, moved, right? And so it was the altar itself was guiding and telling us where to go, what direction to go in.
Right. So I just want to review again for everybody that what's happening there and the way that you can look at it is after you start following your intuition, you need to go and assemble your A team, right? Like in all those superhero movies where they get the gang back together, other people who you know are resonating with that frequency, and your intuition might lead you in that direction. Once you get together, you're all going to bring the items into one space to make an altar. And really, what you're doing is you're concentrating the energy of the magic that wants to be born in one space. And once you have that concentration of energy through all of these objects or whatever you need to concentrate that energy, you then begin to open the space and the journey begins.
Exactly. And then usually people will start to come in. So if you're working with indigenous energy, shamans will show up. If you're working with Celtic energy, somebody might shapeshift into the crone and come as an old haggard lady, or an elf might come and talk to you. And people start to give you information and clues that guide you to go in certain directions, and you have to listen, you have to pay attention, you have to notice, you have to be conscious and aware of what's being guided and who's talking to you. Now, often for we would create our altar and then we would sit in meditation, and sometimes I would channel or somebody would come in and they would kind of guide us of something to expect, and then what we were expecting would show up on the magic trip, and then we'd be completely blown away, and then that would put us in a specific direction, and we would follow the crumbs, like we would follow the lead of what was being shown. And so that would be another step.
And so that's great. And I think a big step here that I don't want to forget that is really important is discernment along that way. So when the journey begins and you've opened the space and you're super open because you're tuning into everything to see if it is a clue leading you to the direction of where you want to go, sometimes things or energies or frequencies slip in there and you meet someone weird. And how do we have discernment to make sure that we stay on the right path, on the frequency?
So I had an entire trip in Mount Shasta, coincidentally. I had several trips there. I was there for 888, 999, 10, 10, 10, 11, 11, 11. That was all on discernment. We were going to have so much fun, and we got really slammed in that lesson. And the trip, actually, the magic trip was a lesson in discernment. And, like you say, you're open and energies can come in, and you have to be really clear on what's your focus, what's your intention. Are you being of service? Why are you there? Is it for a bigger purpose? Is the people that you're interacting with radiating light? What's behind? Do they have an agenda? What are the energies you're interacting with? All those things. So, yeah, that's a really important piece. I mean, since I had that entire trip on discernment, I've been very fortunate that everything else has since then, and that's been a good 10, 15 years, has flowed without that because that is just so not part of my frequency anymore. But yeah, you have to pay attention.
So, what would you say is a way that people could practice discernment or a question that they could ask themselves when they're unsure? Because at the same time, to go with the flow of magic, you can't fall into the vibration of fear. And you have to go out and interact and talk with the world around you in order to receive the clues. And if you're in fear because you don't trust your own discernment, you'll never be able to, get into that flow of magic. So what is like the sort of discernment that people can equip themselves with so that they can cut through any fear and stay on track?
I mean, I guess the only thing I can think of is my very last trip. I was in Mexico for a month, right? Where everything was beautiful and magical. We get to Mexico City, we get out of the Uber to go into our hotel. The guy of the hotel comes out to shake my hand. And as soon as he starts walking toward me, I'm like, this is a hard no. And Debbie also was like, huh. He shakes my hand. I look in his eyes and I just don't feel right. We go into the hotel. He brings us up to our rooms, and I go over to her room and I knock on the door. I'm like, something's off. She's like, I know. She's like, we need to leave. I'm like, I know. We paid for the hotel in full, no way of getting our money back. But we had to take that loss, right? We had to be like, we're going to lose both of our rooms. We're going to have to go somewhere else. And so we just acted on it. There was no questioning it. There was just this knowing. And I think over time, you can just sense. And now it's so easy because the energies are so open. You can really feel frequencies, whether it's a person or it's a place, or let's say you're working in a specific area, you've been guided to go to a sacred site and you're at that sacred site, but then you sense, huh, this is where everyone says the energy is, but the energy is actually over here. It's not where all these people are on this summer solstice where 1,000 are gathered and they think the space is. I'm being called here and there's no one there, but that's where the energy and the magic is. And so over time, you cultivate a sense that grows and becomes stronger, and you just know and you act on it. You don't, where maybe in the past I'd be like, oh, I paid for the room and I'm overreacting or it's fine. I was like, no, that's just a no. And we just had to go somewhere else.
Right. So you follow your intuition and do not allow your mind to rationalize yourself out of your intuition.
Exactly.
And so over time, you have to trust your intuition. And in order to be able to trust your intuition, you have to continuously tune to the frequency that you want to be in alignment with. And when you're tuned to the frequency that you want to be in alignment with, so much so that it's unmistakable if it is that frequency or not, your trust in your intuition will be spot on. And the way that you can tune to that frequency is through meditation, any practice that kind of brings you into that zone. It could be, doing the light codes. It could be any number of things that is in alignment with the frequency that you want to connect with, but you need to continuously practice that so that you know that you can trust your intuition.
Exactly. So when, let's say, give Mexico, because it was recent as an example, we were connecting with the sweetest, most loving indigenous wisdom keepers, right? And they carried this frequency that was just so pure and so beautiful. And then when we arrived at this other place, the contrast was just so strong that we were like, this isn't the frequency that we're threading along our journey that we want to carry forward. And it doesn't necessarily mean that that place or that guy was like evil or something. It just wasn't a frequency that we wanted to match with because we were in this beautiful flow. We had to just exit that. It just wasn't for us.
I think that's a really important point of nothing bad. It wasn't like we knew something bad was that you knew something bad was going to happen. It had
Oh.
nothing to do with, there's no fear around it. It's just you came to cultivate a certain frequency that you're going to transmit around the planet, and you don't want to compromise that frequency. And if you feel like that frequency or your ability to hold it is going to be compromised at all, then you switch because that's the purpose of a magic trip. And a magic trip isn't all the time, right? If your intention is to be somewhere for someone's wedding and it's not about magic, right? Maybe you do stay at the place, right? We don't know. But if your thing is all about holding a certain frequency, that is when you change. And so don't get in fear of like, ooh, if they stayed, something bad would have happened. We don't know, right?
No, 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 it wasn't about that at all. It just wasn't a frequency match for the journey we were on in that moment. We were like on a real high, connected to this beautiful vibration, and we just didn't want any bumps. We wanted to continue on that vein, and we were willing to lose some money or change our plans or be inconvenienced in order to do so. Yeah.
Right. And so it's really about tuning in.
Yeah. Tuning in. And then, if we're doing steps, the other step that is incredibly helpful is what we call magic debriefing.
Hmm. Yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
So you have your altar, you have out all your stuff. I remember when we were with your sister on this magic trip, and we were working with water, and the sacredness of water and the structure of water. We had these tiny little bottles of water everywhere, and we have our map out and our magic tools and our candles and all of our stuff, and we're doing everything right. And we'd have to take our altar. That's why it's nice to have an altar that's portable, our portable altar with us wherever we would go. And then every night, wherever we landed, sometimes we'd be in a place for 3 nights or one night, we'd have to put our altar back out. And then we would sit around the table and we would debrief and we would go through the whole day and we would share. We woke up and then this happened and we ran into this. We had I'm thinking of a really fun, magical morning we had. I guess I could tell you this is
Yeah.
fun. Um, we're in Ireland and we're in the middle of nowhere, right? Like you look out the window, you see the water, no houses anywhere, no place. And we had done magic with Russ the night before, and he came in and he said, I'm so here for you, and soon you're going to feel my presence. I just want you to feel my presence, I want you to feel my presence on this trip with you.
Mhm.
And we're like, great, okay. And so we go to bed and we wake up in the morning and you're in Thailand. Remember this? You're in Thailand on like a silent retreat, or you were doing your boxing thing, and so I'm FaceTiming you. And so it's pretty early in the morning for me. It's like 5 a.m. because of the time change. And I open the cottage door and I'm like walking on these pebbles to go down to show you a picture of the beach and turn my phone around so you can see it. Remember this?
Yeah, I do.
And this sweetest Japanese boy, maybe like 19 years old, just like a fairy kind of pops over and he says, "Hi." And I'm like, "Hi." And I get off the phone with you. And he comes out of nowhere. Like I have no idea where he could be coming from because it's miles and miles to walk anywhere from where we are, right? And he says, "I'm looking for Russ's house." And I'm like, "Of course you are." And so he says, "Do you know where Russ's house is?" And I'm like, I don't, but why don't you come into my Airbnb? I'll call the owner. Maybe he knows where Russ's house is. So he comes in. Your sister's like fast asleep upstairs. She's like stumbling down at 5 in the morning, like, what's going on? And we're like, oh, this young man is here. He's looking for Russ's house. And she's like, of course he is. She's like rubbing her eyes, like, all right, magic in the morning, right? So I go and knock on the owner's door because there's like a cottage in the main house. And I'm like, there's somebody here and he's looking for Russ's house. And he comes over. And he's talking to the kid and he's explaining and pointing, and they're outside all these directions about this place, this Russ's house, I guess. And then the young Japanese boy, so sweet, just like walks away. And we're like, okay, well, we're up now. We start gathering our magic things, packing up because we're on our way to a cave to do something, right? And as I'm packing up the car, he pops up again. He's like, hi. Like, and I'm like, hi. And he's like, I hate to bother you, but it's too far to walk to Russ's house. Would you mind driving at me there? And we're like, sure, of course. So we pack up our car, we put him in, and we're like, so where are you from? Like, where are you traveling? He's like, oh, I've come from Japan because I want to go to Russ's house. And we're like, okay. Oh, before that, when he comes into the house, I forget, he takes out this flute, this little wooden flute, and he plays for us this like thing that just like makes our heart melt. And we're just like, oh my God, this is the sweetest thing, right? So he's decided he wants to go to Russ's house to play this flute for him. And we're like, oh, well, are you going to stay with Russ? Like, who is Russ? And he says, no, Russ is dead. He died, and I love him so much that I want to play this flute for him outside his house just because I want to connect with him. And we're just like, oh my God, okay. So we drive over, and there's like this steep thing, like down in the mud, and we park our car up at the top, and there's this little white cottage on the ocean. And he like skips like a fairy down. He like falls in the mud and like pops up, like, I'm okay. And he goes down and he plays the flute outside this house. And we're just watching, like, okay. And then he comes back up and he gets in the car, and we say, were you able to get what you needed or do what you had to do? And he just closes his eyes and he's the sweetest thing. He puts his hands on his heart like this and he says, I've come to feel Russ's presence. And now I have. And I can go back home to Japan. And we're like, of course you have. Okay. And then we drive him over to his Airbnb. We let him out, and I guess his parents were there, and he stands on the stoop and just keeps waving at us as we pull away. And because of that interaction and the time it took, it changed the course of our day, which led us to this beautiful magical cave that we wouldn't have gone to that has an entirely different magical story. And so, it was just such sweetness. And what was the point of that? That you're on a magic trip, and then all these things happen all day long, and then you do the debriefing. So then that night we sit and I share my perspective of the story and they share theirs, and then different clues and things come in around the day, and then the different things in the day weave together and they create an energy. The magic is born from the debriefing, and then the days start to link together, and then they create an entire story, an entire energetic frequency that becomes, well, for us, it becomes a light code, a vibration that then's transmitted to be received, to support and really in activating our light bodies is what's happening.
Right. And in the debrief, it's kind of like putting all the pieces of the puzzle together, and everybody recognized a different piece of the puzzle. And by communing all together at the end, you finally put it together, and that's where it really begins to be magical. And like with the altars, you're bringing more and more frequency to that energy because you usually debrief near the altar. And as you debrief near the altar, put more and more and more of that frequency into the altar so that it concentrates and you can tune to it even on a greater level so that you can then transmit it to others later and bring it like fairy dust all around the globe, dropping it wherever you go.
Yeah, because it gains potency and it has the frequency of the place and the land where you were and the purpose that it had. And then let's say you go on a different trip somewhere else, you take that potency when it's time for the next magic trip and you're gathering things at home. You're like, oh, that magic, egg that I had in Mount Shasta, I'm going to bring with me or going to send to Debashri in India, and she's going to carry it to Mount Everest, and it's going to receive the codes of Mount Everest, and then it's going to go with her to the Arctic to be dropped into the water because Dr. Emoto had touched it. And when I was in Mount Shasta and Mateus and Debashri connect in the middle of nowhere, and he holds the egg that she's been waiting for, and it gets put in the summer solstice in the center of the Arctic, right? And so, yeah, it all links together. It continues to move forward over time.
Right, which a huge aspect of it is non-attachment to one, how the day is going to go. Say you had a plan to go to a cave and then this Japanese boy comes and asks you to drive you to Russ's, right? If you were rigid and attached to your plan to go to the cave, then you wouldn't have had that experience, and then you wouldn't have been at the other cave at the right time, and etc., right? So there has to be a non-attachment. Say you were attached to the egg and it was really special to you because it's gone on around the globe, then she wouldn't have brought it. Or if she did bring it, then she wouldn't want, Mateus dropping it into the middle of the ocean, right? So there has to be a level of non-attachment in order to bring all of these pieces together. So I want to wrap it up there because we're gonna run out of time, but I'll give you a debrief of the steps, right? So there's the spark where you have this intuitive inspiration, where this vision comes to you, or you have a calling to go somewhere, create something, act in a certain way, etc. Then you say your prayer of what you need in order to do that thing. If you have this calling that you need to go to Australia, you say a prayer to whoever wants you to go there that I need the money by this time in order to go there, or I need these materials, or I need this decision to be resolved, or whatever. Then the next step after that is to surrender your logic and trust your intuition. And that's like the packing, the getting ready, bringing all the objects that hold or remind you of that frequency, that can hold what the energy is that you're coming to bring. You put those all into an altar or a space to kind of collect the frequency, and you open that sacred space. Once you open that sacred space, you begin to then interact with the world in an open, non-attached way. And you follow the signs because you have set an intention that is greater than yourself, an intention to evolve greater than yourself, an intention to heal greater than yourself, an intention to create greater than yourself. And you go, you follow the magic, and as you move in this non-attached way with intention and presence, at the end, you debrief and bring all that frequency together to create something. And I forgot one step: assemble your A team. But that's essentially everything that people need to know in order to create the magic. And to let go of the pressure, to let go of the expectations, to let go of what it means if the magic comes or if the magic doesn't, and just to trust that what is perfect.
You got it. You're in the magical frequency.
All right, awesome. Anything else that you want to footnote there?
I just want to say that magic is everywhere all the time, and you don't have to go to Egypt or Malta or Göbekli Tepe to feel the magic, that it's always here, and that any and everybody can experience it, as we just have to play and be childlike and tune back in and intend and trust and open up and know that it is true.
All right, awesome, everybody. Well, we'll catch you next week with another episode of Seriously Human, diving into the humanness of my mother, the channel of the Angel Raphael. All right. Love, 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 everybody. See you
Love,
next.
love, love. Bye, guys. Mwah.